If someone had told me a year ago that I'd be paying child support for a kid that wasn't mine, I would have laughed and told them to stop watching soap operas. But here I am, not a character in a TV drama, just a regular guy with an empty wallet and a broken heart. Let me start from the beginning. My name's David. I'm 36, work 2 jobs, and used to be married to Lisa, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. We were married for 6 years, together for 8. She wasn't the love of my life, but she was familiar. Like an old couch, a bit worn out, but comfortable enough. We had a son, Abel. At least, I thought we did. Abel was 5, a small, quiet kid who liked drawing on walls and asking a million questions. I loved him more than anything. I worked myself to the bone, pulling extra shifts at the warehouse, driving Uber on weekends, just to make sure he had everything he needed. Then Lisa dropped the bombshell. She wanted a divorce. You must be wondering, at this point, why Lisa wants a divorce. Well, if you stick around for a while longer, you will find out. In the meantime, I do hope you have subscribed to my channel, your go-to channel for interesting stories. Now, back to the story. No big fight, no dramatic reason, just a cold, we've grown apart. She said it like she was canceling a gym membership, not ending a marriage. I sat there, blinking, wondering if I'd missed something. By the time the divorce was final, the court had me paying $800 a month in child support. It stung, but I didn't argue. Abel was my son. My blood. I'd pay $1,000 if I had to. But then, small things started poking at me. Lisa always acted strange when I asked about Abel's health. One time, I mentioned how Abel's skin reacted badly to mosquito bites, and I casually asked if Lisa's family had a history of sensitive skin. She froze for a second, just long enough for me to notice, then snapped, "Why are you so obsessed with Abel's skin?" Another time, Abel had an ear infection, and I asked if anyone in her family had a history of those. Lisa's jaw tightened, and she changed the subject so fast, I didn't even get a proper answer. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe the divorce made her defensive. But then came the birthday party. It was Abel's 6th birthday. A small party, just close family, with a cake that looked like it had been decorated by a blindfolded toddler. We were gathered in Lisa's backyard when my Aunt Patricia, the human version of a broken fire alarm, blurted out the words that changed everything. "He doesn't look like you at all." Silence. You know that awkward moment when someone drops a glass at a party and everyone freezes? That's what it felt like, only the glass was my heart, and the sound of it shattering echoed in my head. People laughed nervously, but I saw the quick glance Lisa shot at me, like a kid caught stealing candy. That night, I couldn't sleep. Aunt Patricia's words replayed over and over again. I started thinking about Abel's dark curly hair, so different from my straight brown hair. His eyes a shade of green that didn't match mine or Lisa's. I told myself I was being ridiculous. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next weekend, when Abel came over, I did something I never thought I'd do. While he was playing with his toys, I grabbed his tiny blue hairbrush, the one with the cartoon car on it, and carefully picked out a few strands of hair. My hands were shaking. I felt like a criminal, stealing evidence from my own child. I sent the hair off for a DNA test. I told myself it was just to silence the stupid thoughts in my head. I was sure the test would prove I was his father. 2 weeks later, the results came in. I opened the envelope slowly, like I was disarming a bomb. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. I read it again. And again. But the result didn't change. Abel wasn't my son. I wasn't his father. I was just a man paying child support for another man's child. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the DNA results. Could have been a minute, could have been an hour. All I know is that something inside me cracked, like a window slowly splintering before it shatters. I kept thinking, maybe there's a mistake. Maybe the lab mixed up the samples. Maybe they sent me someone else's results. I even Googled, can DNA tests be wrong? Like some desperate fool hoping science had a loophole. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Eventually, I did what any reasonable man would do. I went straight to Lisa's house. She opened the door, looking bored, like I was a delivery guy bringing her the wrong order. I didn't waste time. I held up the DNA results. Explain this. For a second, just a second, I saw a panic flash across her face. But then it was gone, replaced by a calm, almost blank look. She crossed her arms. So, I repeated, my voice shaking. It says Abel isn't mine. Lisa shrugged. Actually shrugged, like I'd told her it might rain later. I thought you knew, she said. My brain short-circuited. Knew what? That you weren't his biological father. I felt like I'd just been hit by a truck. And when exactly were you planning to mention that? Lisa sighed, like I was being dramatic. Look, David, it didn't seem important. You've been raising him since he was born. You're his dad in every way that matters. I blinked. Every way except the biological way. She actually had the nerve to roll her eyes. Why are you making this a big deal? A big deal. My hands were shaking. Who's his father then? Her lips pressed into a thin line. It doesn't matter. It does to me. I shouted. That's when Abel appeared in the hallway, clutching his teddy bear. His big green eyes looked up at me, the same green eyes that suddenly made no sense. I lowered my voice. Lisa, who is his father? Silence. Then, in a voice so cold it could freeze water, she said, that's none of your business. None of my business. I left before I said something I'd regret. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was what came next. The next day, I went to my lawyer, a tired-looking man named Greg, who always smelled like burnt coffee. I dropped the DNA test on his desk and said, I'm done paying child support. He's not my son. Greg didn't even blink. That's not how it works, he said. I stared at him. What do you mean? He's not my kid. Greg sighed like he'd had this conversation 100 times before. You signed the birth certificate. You've acted as Abel's father for years. Legally, you're still responsible for child support. I felt like I was losing my mind. So you're saying I have to keep paying $800 a month for someone else's kid? Legally, yes. I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. So let me get this straight. I work 2 jobs, pay rent, barely sleep, and now I'm funding a child who isn't even mine? Greg nodded, as if this was all perfectly reasonable. I left his office numb. The law didn't care about DNA. It didn't care about me. All it cared about was the fact that I had once believed Abel was mine, and that was enough to trap me in this nightmare. The days after that meeting with Greg were a blur. I kept replaying the words in my head. Legally, you're still responsible. It didn't matter that Abel wasn't mine. It didn't matter that Lisa had lied. The law saw me as a walking ATM, one programmed to spit out $800 a month, no questions asked. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Abel. Thinking about how I used to hold him as a baby, how I taught him to ride his bike, how he'd call me Dada before he could even form proper words. And now I wasn't his father. I was just a man with a bill. I wasn't angry at Abel. How could I be? He was just a kid. He didn't ask for this. But Lisa? Lisa had built a whole life on a lie. One evening, I decided I needed answers. Real answers. I showed up at Lisa's house again, this time calmer, but more determined. She opened the door, eyebrows raised. What now? I took a deep breath. Who's Abel's father? Her jaw tightened. I told you, it doesn't matter. I stepped inside, not waiting for an invite. It matters to me. Her face twisted, not in sadness or guilt, but in annoyance. Like I was a customer complaining about cold fries. If you must know, she said, crossing her arms, it was Eric. Eric, her ex-boyfriend. The one she swore she hadn't spoken to in years. The one who had mysteriously popped up at Abel's birthday party last year. The one who had the exact same green eyes as Abel. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the only thing I could do to stop myself from screaming. So let me get this straight, I said. You had a baby with Eric, told me he was mine, let me sign the birth certificate, and now I'm the one stuck paying for him? Lisa didn't even flinch. You're his father in every way that counts. Except biology, I snapped. She shrugged. Why does that matter? I stared at her, stunned. Because I'm broke, Lisa. Because I'm working 2 jobs to support a child that isn't mine. Because you lied for 6 years. Silence. Then she hit me with the most ridiculous line I've ever heard in my life. Well, Eric doesn't have money like you do. I blinked. So I'm paying for his kid because he's broke? Lisa said nothing. I left before I did something stupid. The next few weeks were a mess of court dates and legal arguments. I tried to fight it, I really did. I showed the judge the DNA results, explained that Abel wasn't mine, begged to have the child support stopped. The judge looked at me with the same tired expression Greg had. You signed the birth certificate, he said. You accepted the responsibility. I clenched my jaw. But he's not mine. That doesn't change your legal obligation. I couldn't believe it. I lost the case. The court didn't care that Abel wasn't my biological son. They cared that I had loved him, raised him, and provided for him. To them, that was enough. So now, every month, $800 leaves my account for a child that isn't mine. Abel still calls me Dad, and that hurts more than anything. Because in his heart, I'm his father. But in reality, I'm just the man footing the bill for someone else's child. And the worst part? The real father, Eric, gets to play the fun uncle role while I break my back working 2 jobs. That's my life now. A paycheck, not a parent. And the law doesn't care. Please like and subscribe to this channel for stories. I bet you won't regret it.